The Charlotte Ledger Podcast is a member of the Queen City Podcast Network.
This episode of the Charlotte Ledger Podcast is sponsored by Childcare Search. Finding childcare is more than checking a box. It's peace of mind. For over 40 years, Childcare Search, a service of Childcare Resources Incorporated, has helped families find safe, nurturing, quality childcare options. Their free referral service connects you to licensed programs that fit your family's needs. Visit findchildcarenc.org or call 1-888-600-1685 to talk to a childcare navigator today. Hi, I'm Lindsey Banks, and you're listening to the Charlotte Ledger Podcast. For more information about the Charlotte Ledger or to subscribe to one of our newsletters, please visit thecharlotteledger.com. Today's guest is Larissa Mañón Mervin, the CEO of the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy. She stepped into the role in May of 2025, leading the organization's strategy, financial sustainability, and community partnerships. But before joining the Advocacy Center, she spent nearly a decade with Legal Aid of North Carolina, where she oversaw offices across the Piedmont region and built her career advocating for survivors of domestic violence and other vulnerable populations. Larissa, thanks so much for joining us today on the Charlotte Ledger Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we have a lot I want to get into today, but first I was kind of hoping to learn a little bit more about you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you were doing before you became CEO back in May?
Yes, so I have been a nonprofit attorney for my entire career. I actually did not think to go to law school, that was not a goal of mine. I didn't even know, lawyers growing up or know of legal services generally. And so I went to college to get a dance degree, and I had always enjoyed dance growing up. And so that's what I decided that I would pursue. And then while I was in undergrad, I had an advisor kind of direct me in this path. She knew a lot about my upbringing and my story, and my family experienced many things over the years, much of which, is connected to kind of the work that I do now. And so she got to learn about that and made some connections for me and shared about legal services. I met some people at that time at Legal Aid of North Carolina in Greensboro. And then from then on, decided to go to law school and again, have been in public interest the whole career. And so I started off as a domestic violence staff attorney working on domestic violence protective orders, child custody cases, as well as some other ancillary family matters and, other cases that come up that are connected with survivors of domestic violence. And did that for years, supervised the team here in Charlotte who works on that at Legal Aid of North Carolina. And then after doing that for some time, was presented with an opportunity to do some statewide pro bono work with Legal Aid of North Carolina. And so I was a supervising attorney on that team. And then from there, continued on that path of leadership. One of my former managers retired at Legal Aid of North Carolina. And so I ended up leading the Charlotte office for Legal Aid of North Carolina, as well as the greater region. So it was a 7-county region that I managed for Legal Aid of North Carolina. And then when this opportunity presented itself, there were people in the community who recommended me for the job, and I was able to chat some with the people who are currently here. It's our sister organizations, Legal Aid of North Carolina and Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy are sister organizations. So I knew some of the people here and was able to kind of explore that further. And so I'm super excited to be here now.
So were you already living in Charlotte, or did you move to Charlotte for this role?
I was already living in Charlotte. I've been here since 2018. So even though I started Legal Aid of North Carolina in the Triangle, I was at Legal Aid of North Carolina from 2018 until I took this position.
Okay. And are you from the Triangle area?
So I'm originally from upstate New York. And then when I was younger, yes, we moved to Raleigh.
Okay, great. So I want to ask you a little bit about what Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy does. I know the organization's been around since 1967, but I'm assuming it's probably grown and changed a little bit over the decades. So can you kind of tell us today what the center, focuses on and who your clients are?
Sure. So Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy is a nonprofit law firm. And so, as you mentioned, it's been around since 1967. It's the oldest continuously serving legal services organization in our state. Our mission is to pursue justice for those in need, and our vision is to build a just community. And so we do that by providing civil legal services for our region's low-income residents, and even throughout the state. Like, some of our programs are statewide as well. And we do that in a variety of ways. So we have different strategies that help us advocate for the community, and that can be individual advice, it can be direct representation of clients, community education and outreach, representation of groups, some self-help materials. We certainly collaborate with a lot of community partners, do community economic development, and we also try to participate in advocacy, kind of systemic advocacy and impact litigation. So we're really fortunate in that we can address these barriers that people have to financial security, healthcare, housing, opportunity, pretty much their safety, shelter, stability, things that are basic needs for our community. We can address them in a variety of advocacy ways.
How many clients do you serve on, I don't know if you measure it weekly, monthly, yearly, but how many clients would you say you serve on average?
We serve over 10,000 clients each year.
Okay.
And but to put that into perspective, more than 300,000 people in our region are eligible for services, right? And can't afford private lawyers. So, we have this statistic that we share together with our sister organization, Legal Aid of North Carolina, that in Mecklenburg County, there's one legal services attorney for every 10,000 eligible clients. And statewide, there's one legal services attorney for every 8,000 eligible clients. So the need is great, but we do as much as we can do, and we help in a variety of issues.
And you've already kind of talked about this a little bit, but I'm curious, what drew you to this role at Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy? And also, I've been told that you're the first permanent woman Latina leader of the organization. So what does that mean to you as well?
Yes. So I'll start with the first question. What led me to this role is that I grew up in a lower income household that honestly, we experienced many of the things that our clients experience. And what really, helped my brothers and me and my family is that our community was incredibly impactful. We had, they say it takes a village, and it certainly took a village for us. My mom's phenomenal. She raised us, and she also had a really great support system. And so we're very fortunate to have kind of just investment by the community and by leaders in our community and teachers and our school system. And so I saw the impact that had on me, and I, saw various things happen throughout the community that I was living in and in my household. And so again, when I went into undergrad and I, had this advisor in one of my courses, in my sociology course, where I was sharing about this that's when, she told me about legal services. And so that's kind of how that took off. And then to answer your question about what it's like to be the first woman to lead this organization and the first Latina, it is inarticulable at times. It is an incredible feeling that I don't, and just an honor that I don't really take lightly. My parents made significant sacrifices to provide opportunities to my brothers and me that they didn't have and that they, will never have. And my parents are from the Caribbean. My dad's from the Dominican Republic. My mom's from Puerto Rico. And so they both moved here at different points throughout her childhood, and then my dad when he was an adult. And so, to be in this position and to stand on the shoulders of people who came before me so that I could do something like this is incredible. And it's funny because I didn't even really think about the woman part at first. One of my mentors at Legal Aid of North Carolina, when I got the job, congratulated me, and she's like, "Do you realize you're the first woman to lead that organization?" And she said that, and before she said it to me, I was like, "Oh, like I didn't even think about that. Like that's not even what was going through my mind." But when she said it, it's true. And I thought about her and other people like her who mentored me, who were the first in a lot of what they did, right? And so to be able to have been mentored by these women, trained by these women, and then be able to now be in this position is incredible. I would like to also just shout out, we had an incredible interim leader who is a woman and did a great job of leading the organization in an interim level until I was hired for this position. So I do want to give her credit, and that, it definitely, I'm the first woman to permanently lead in this role, but she did a fantastic job. So I want to give her flowers, but certainly feels incredible to just be able to be in this role as a Latina and Afro-Latina at that. I think sometimes people don't realize that, there's so much intersectionality and like overlap between cultures. And so my dad's a Black Latino, and so I'm Afro-Latina. And so just, again, the people who've gone before me, it just feels incredible to be here. And my goal is always to bring the next generation of leaders up with me, right? And to pull people alongside me and to pay it forward. So I'm just really grateful for the opportunity.
That's awesome. So I think it's probably fair to say, you stepped into this role back in May of 2025. I would say that you've joined at a time, of real upheaval. I'm sure every year brings its new set of challenges, but, currently you're experiencing federal grant pauses, funding cuts, staff reductions. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the beginning of the year, back in January, you had 72 people on your staff, but you're now down to 52. Can you kind of talk about some of those issues and obstacles you're facing and how you've, approached leading through that kind of uncertainty?
Certainly. Yeah. It's an interesting time to take a position like this and also just be in legal services generally. I mean, I think the whole nonprofit community is feeling what, I'm currently feeling. So it's certainly not unique to me or to our organization. Every single legal services organization in our state has been impacted this year, and many nonprofits have been impacted this year. And so, it's disheartening at times and can feel heavy at times, but it's also incredibly rewarding to be in a community where people are so supportive of the work that we do, and they really understand the value and in the work that we do. And so we're very fortunate in that way here in Charlotte. And, because of that, I think that helps us sustain an already sustainable organization. And so, one of the ways that I've tried to lead throughout this time, at least for our staff, to your question, is really just being transparent and creative, right? I think those are two ways that I've really tried to focus on leading throughout this time. So, as far as transparency goes, just being willing to share where we're at in any given moment, that goes a long way with staff, to let them know what we're experiencing, what our community partners are experiencing. Anytime there's a change in funding, what that means for us and how that's going to impact us. The minute I know, I'm sharing with them, as well as, our stakeholders, whether that's the board of trustees or community partners or funders. Just keeping people informed, I think, really goes a long way. And then also creativity, just being willing to think outside the box and think about what works best for us as an organization. One of the greatest opportunities I've had is that leaders who are starting new in an organization as the CEO or as the executive director, they're already having these thought exercises of like, how do I want to reorganize, and what's the vision that I have for our organization, and where do I see ourselves going? And so you can look at it as like a really hard time, and it certainly has been in some ways, but I also see it as a great opportunity, because I would have already been having those discussions and those thought exercises. And so to be able to do them in a time where we have to be thinking about that anyway, and there's opportunities for collaboration and, with other partners and different ways that we can recreate kind of how we think about services. I don't know. I find it as to be rewarding, to be a great opportunity. And, I'll give an example of one of those kind of experiences that I've had in my first 6 months. So, with the Council for Children's Rights, that was devastating for the community to hear that they would be dissolving, largely because of what other nonprofits are experiencing in funding cuts and disruptions. And that's an organization that I had worked with, throughout the years at my time at Legal Aid. So the council had multiple programs. The education law program was not the only one that they had. Unfortunately, some of the other programs had sunset, and so that particular program was the one that we were able to acquire. And they help with a variety of education law matters for children in our region. And so, that looks like a variety of things: disciplinary matters, McKinney-Vento issues, 504 plans, IEPs. They also have a foster care initiative helping with children and education disputes in the foster care system. And so it was very important to continue to offer that to the community. And so definitely there's a sense of the collective that, we all feel when we're in legal services. And so if one person's impacted, we all feel it, and it's personal to all of us. And so it was really important to me to be able to see what we could do to kind of help them in their time of need. And so we were able to bring on and acquire the remaining program that they had, the education law program. And so, that's an example of you can look at a really hard time and focus on the negative, or we can say, wow, how can we be creative and innovative during this time and collaborate so that we can continue providing the services to the clients that we all care about? Because, ultimately, that's why we're doing this work.
We'll be right back to the conversation, but first, just wanted to pop in here with a reminder that this episode of the Charlotte Ledger podcast is presented by Childcare Search, Charlotte's trusted childcare guidance for families. So could you maybe paint a picture of how, these funding disruptions are affecting your clients and the programs that they rely on day to day?
Right. Funding disruptions have impacted every single program. So I think maybe the best thing for me to do, and this is what I really like to do, is bring it back to the clients and their stories. And we have some clients who have been willing to share stories. And so I'd like to share some of those, because I think when people see or hear about the work that we do, they then understand a little bit more why it's needed. So we had a client who came to us because she had been wrongfully accused of fraud with her child care subsidy through the Department of Social Services. She shared a little snippet from her own words, and I want to share those because I just think that hearing it from her perspective is impactful. She says, "My name is Tad, and I want to share a heartfelt story about a journey I never expected to take. Last year, I found myself in a tough spot with Mecklenburg County Services, who informed me that I owed them more than $57,000. Apparently, my children's father's address was still associated with mine in the North Carolina state system, even though he hadn't lived there for years. It was a devastating surprise. As a single mother of 3, I was already struggling, especially after recently losing my job. On top of that, I had received a bill from Child Care Resources demanding repayment for assistance I had received while my kids were in daycare. They insisted I owed the money due to my ex's address being linked to mine. I felt completely overwhelmed, caught in a whirlwind of confusion and stress. That's when I reached out to the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy, and I hit the jackpot. I was connected with a true angel, Mika Clark, from the Family Support and Healthcare Program. We spent countless hours on the phone, brainstorming solutions to secure my children's future and maintain my mental well-being. No matter how tough things got, she never let me feel alone. When my first hearing arrived, things didn't go as planned. The hearing officer sided with Mecklenburg County, and my heart sank. But Mika refused to let me give up. She immediately helped me file an appeal, digging deep to uncover my ex's last known address and guiding me through every step of the process. I was terrified of losing my home and my children, but she reassured me that we would find a way. Thanks to her relentless support and advocacy, my appeal was successful. Not only did I regain my child care assistance, but I also regained hope. So that is just one of the many, many stories. We're serving over 10,000 clients each year. That's just one of the many stories of people who receive significant impact from our services. And the sad part about the funding disruptions and cuts are, some of the people on that team that would have helped her throughout that process are no longer with us because of those funding disruptions. And so, that's the direct impact that it has on clients. And we're doing incredible work, and we'll continue to do incredible work. We're not going anywhere despite, the times that we're living in. But it's much harder when there's funding disruptions and cuts. And, the more that we're adequately funded, the better that we can represent people like Tab in this situation.
Have you noticed, over the past, I know you've been with the organization 6 months now. So in that time, have you noticed an increase of people seeking help in this region?
I think that the need will inevitably go up as we see policy changes throughout our country and our state. As far as intake, I don't have exact intake numbers. I imagine it looks similar. I will say that what we do know is that the need is going to go up while the services just kind of generally are going to be less available based on resources. And that's just something that's happening across the state and nation with legal services, not just us. And so, I mean, that's to be expected. People are really hurting economically. And as, changes have happened in policy benefits, and as there's, changes coming with Medicaid and SNAP benefits and other benefits, I mean, people are just going to need more assistance, and that's just, cause and effect. And so we anticipate that being an issue. And then, in terms of immigration, we serve immigrant survivors and, people who need actual, immigration relief and who are entitled to legal relief based on, their particular situations, are understandably nervous to seek help. They don't know whether or not they can seek help, or like what the consequences of that will be. And so that is a very real fear for some of our clients. There's so much rhetoric that is happening right now about immigration and, immigrants. And I think even, when it comes to our immigration practice, people don't realize is that if as I mentioned, we are limited in services. So if we are representing someone in an immigration matter, it is because there is an immigration remedy for them. There is a way for them to receive documentation potentially. There is a way for them to they are eligible for those services. There's merit to their case. And so, there's so much talk about, as some people would term it, illegal immigration. And what I would say to that is just for people to become better informed. There are actually, people who are eligible for various forms of immigration relief and are entitled to those based on our statutes and our laws. And they should absolutely be seeking that relief if they're eligible for it. And if we are representing them, it is because they are, right? It's because we found merit in their case, and we are helping them with a need that they have at the moment, the same way we would help anyone in any of our practice areas.
Okay. So I was doing a little bit of research, and I read that there's a funding freeze on the interest on lawyers' trust accounts, which I think, to my understanding, is just a way for civil legal services to kind of raise money for the work that they do. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and what that loss would look like on the ground, especially here in Mecklenburg County.
Right. So the freeze is already in place. It went into place July 1st. And so to share a little bit about North Carolina IOLTA, they're a fantastic program. And about the history, the North Carolina State Bar and North Carolina Supreme Court established North Carolina IOLTA in 1983. And the idea was that, any lawyer in North Carolina is required to have a general trust account for client funds. And it's a requirement that we have through the State Bar. Well, the interest on those accounts generates income. And, when the interest rates are higher, there's obviously more income from that. And so that income is used to fund civil legal services and other programs for the public's benefit in the state. And so every legal services organization that I know of in our state currently has applied or redeemed from NCIOLTA. And we're one of the bigger beneficiaries, if you will, from that program. I mean, there's multiple programs across the state that receive funding, but about 15% of our budget comes from North Carolina IOLTA. And so that helps in a variety of ways. So that helps to fund our general operating expenses, some of our immigrant work, as well as our pro bono program. And we are known for having one of the best pro bono programs in the area, like Legal Aid of North Carolina and Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy have a great partnership with our pro bono programs in Charlotte. And so, that pro bono program is funded, and, for our organization in large part by IOLTA. So, that has had a really significant impact, will likely have a larger significant impact throughout the year for other legal services organizations, because if every legal services organization who benefits from having IOLTA funding continues to lose income from this freeze, that will inevitably impact services.
Right. Okay. Well, we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask one more question, kind of looking ahead as you settle into this role. What are some of your top goals that you have over the next year, and how can the community support your work?
Yeah, so I mean, the main goal is just to keep providing the great services that we already provide. I obviously shared the one story, but there's so many more like that, right? In all the different practice areas. And so my goal is just to continue serving in every single one of those practice areas. I also hope to grow the organization to be able to maximize the amount of people that we're serving in the community. As I mentioned, the need is great, and there's so much more need in any of these areas that we've mentioned, as well as some of the areas that we've maybe had to temporarily pause but would like to continue. And so my hope is to continue growing the organization in a way that continues to maximize the services that clients get. And the way that people can help right now is your time, your talent, your treasure are all very helpful to us. Spread the word. If you hear about us, if you hear this podcast and you hear us talking about the great work we're doing, browse our website, see more about ways you can get involved. Maybe you can do some hands-on work and get involved for us that way. Again, maybe you can just share the podcast with people throughout your network, and they can hear more about the work that we're doing. And of course, you can always financially support, and you can do that through our website. But certainly your support, whether that is, whatever that looks like, whether that's verbal or just sharing information or boots on the ground or your treasure, we will take it all right now. We're just incredibly grateful again for the great community that we have and are grateful for the support.
Awesome. And we will make sure that your website is in the episode notes for this podcast episode. So to our listeners, make sure to check it out there. Those were all of the questions I had. Was there anything else you would like to talk about that you were hoping to bring up?
No, I mean, I think that's it. I thank you for your time and for spotlighting Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy. The advocates here do great work, and I'm just really excited that we can continue this service for the many people who need it in our community.
Thank you so much. That's a wrap. Thanks for listening. For more information on the Charlotte Ledger, visit our website at thecharlotteledger.com. This podcast episode was presented by Childcare Search, helping families find safe, quality childcare with free referrals and support every step of the way.
QueenCityPodcastNetwork.com.